All right, guys, this is lesson 20. We're going to be using coordinate systems to solve real-world problems. So just like lesson 19, we're still going to be seeing line graphs, as you can see here, total tomato production, and then answering questions about those line graphs. I'm starting with page 107, and then I will make a separate video for page 108. All right, let's get started. It says the line graph below tracks the total tomato production for one tomato plant. The total tomato production is plotted at the end of each 8 weeks. At the end of each of 8 weeks. Use the information in the graph to answer the questions that follow. So when they say tomato production, it means the amount of tomatoes that a plant produces. So the amount of tomatoes that a plant grows. All right, it says first, how many pounds of tomatoes did this plant produce at the end of 13 weeks? So I have to go to the end here, and I'm noticing 13 weeks, it is at 10 pounds. So at the end of 13 weeks, it produced 10 pounds. Oops. We're starting off with an easier question. All right, that one was easy enough. Let's look at part B. How many pounds of tomatoes did this plant produce from week 7 to week 11? Explain how you know. Okay, when they're asking about how much is produced between week 7 and week 11, we first have to find where those 2 weeks are. So right here is week 7. Right here is week 11. So they're asking how many pounds were produced. So I'm going to have to first look at how many pounds were produced in week 7 and then how many pounds were produced in week 11. So it looks like at week 7, there were 3 pounds of tomatoes produced. And then at week 11, it was up to 9 pounds produced. So we started at 3 and ended at 9. So you have to think about what the difference with that in those two numbers would be, and that's 6 pounds. So the plant produced 6 pounds of tomatoes. And so then it also asks you to explain. So it had 3 pounds at week 7, and it was up to 9 pounds at week 11. The difference, oops, not week 1, week 11. All right, that one's pretty easy too. Let's look at C. It says, which 1 week period shows the greatest change in tomato production? The least. Explain how you know. So we're looking for the greatest change in tomato production and the least change in tomato production. So when they're asking for the greatest change, I'm looking between 2 points and finding the steepest line. A steep line means more tomatoes were produced. So if I'm just looking here, I'm noticing there's one pretty steep line. There are some other increases, but one line is the steepest, which means there was the greatest change. So it looks like from week 9 to week 10, there was the greatest change in tomato production, the greatest increase. So it goes from 5 to about, like 8.5. There's other increases, but they're not quite as large as this increase from week 9 to 10. So let's first start with that one. We also have to talk about the least, but I'm just going to start with, why does it keep doing that? Oops. All right. So week 9 to 10. All right, now let's talk about where it is the least. So I'm trying now to do the opposite. Obviously, each one goes up a little bit, but there is one part where there is no change in the tomato production. So this is a part of the line graph where it's actually flat, and that means that no tomatoes were produced. So on a line graph, if between 2 points is flat, it means that there's no change. So I want you to look at the graph. Between what 2 weeks was there the least change in tomato production? All right, it's between week 11 and 12. It goes from 9 and it stays at 9. So that means no tomatoes were produced between these 2 weeks. The least change was let's look at the last one. It says during weeks 6 to 8, Jason fed the tomato plant just water. During weeks 8 to 10, he used a mixture of water and fertilizer A. And in weeks 10 to 13, he used water and fertilizer B on the tomato plant. Compare the tomato production for these 3 periods of times. All right, so we have weeks 6 to 8. 6 to 8. We have weeks 8 to 10. 8 to 10. And then we have weeks 10 to 13. Okay, so I'm going to actually draw little marks where you guys can see between weeks 6 to 8, between weeks 8 to 10, and then weeks 10 to 13. So this right here is water only. Sorry, it's really hard for me to write water. That's supposed to say water. Right here is water plus, I think he calls it fertilizer A. So water plus fertilizer A. This part is water plus fertilizer B. All right, so I want you to pause the video and look between each of these X's I've made. Between 6 and 8 was water only. Look at how the line changes. Between 8 and 10 is water and fertilizer A. And then between week 10 and week 13, he uses water and fertilizer B. So take a minute and think about what this might mean. Okay, so when I look at those, I want to use, how do I get out of, all right, I'm just going to talk about this, and then when I put the answer key on the slideshow, you guys can see my explanation. So when I look here, I'm noticing from 6 to 8, it is increasing. So it looks like the water helped the tomatoes. It goes from like, I don't know, 1.5 tomatoes. I know it doesn't really make sense to have 1.5, but maybe it wasn't fully grown, to just like about 3.5. And then it goes, starting at week 8, 3.5 to, oh, it does make sense because it's in pounds, sorry. About 3.5 pounds to 8.5 pounds, and then 8.5 pounds to 10 pounds. So when I look at this, I'm noticing that the water helped make the tomatoes, but fertilizer A really seemed to make the greatest difference. And it made more tomatoes than just the water. And it's because this line is steeper. And then fertilizer B didn't really seem to help very much at all. The tomato production barely increases from week 10 to week 13. So again, what I just said, I'm going to post on the answer key so you can see it written out.